Welcome back to Act 4 of Deconstructing Directing, Text, Playwrights, and Dramaturgy. I'm Andrew Robler, the founder and archivist here, and I am so glad that you're here. So far in Act 4, we've been looking at the idea of script analysis. In Scene 1, we talked about why script analysis matters. In Scene 2, we explored a number of different approaches to analyzing a script. And in Scene 3, we took a closer look at the concepts of genre and style. Now, in Scene 4, we're going to look at two topics that on their face may seem odd to address together, but they actually have a lot to do with one another: stage directions and copyright. Both of these topics tie back to three components of the flame paradigm for defining our role as directors, namely facilitation, leadership, and artistic insight and taste. They relate to facilitation because part of our role is to help our team interpret the work of the playwright. They relate to leadership because we set the example for how we respect the authorship of the play while also balancing the needs of the production. And they relate to artistic insight and taste because we are often trusted to choose what to keep, adapt, or ignore when it comes to the stage directions of a play. So let's get started. Let's start by getting specific about what stage directions are and how we interact with them as directors. On the surface, stage directions look simple. They tell us when a character enters, what they're holding, or how they say a line. But in reality, they're a complicated mix of artistry, legality, and authorship. Do we treat them as gospel, as suggestion, or something in between? Stage directions can serve a few different functions. They act as story mechanics, making sure we know who's in the scene and what's happening physically, which might read like, John enters with a sword. They can inform tone and rhythm, helping to pace the scene or clarify subtext, which might read like, she collapses into the chair as though gravity doubled. And they can serve as a reminder of authorial voice, like in The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams, where he says, the scene is memory and is therefore non-realistic. Memory takes a lot of poetic license. It omits some details, others are exaggerated according to the emotional value of the articles it touches, for memory is seated predominantly in the heart. Some of my favorite stage directions fall into this last category. Some playwrights barely use them. Shakespeare, for instance, rarely wrote anything more detailed than "they fight" or "exit pursued by a bear." Others, like Eugene O'Neill, filled entire pages with scenic and emotional description. So before we even decide what to do with stage directions, we have to recognize that they aren't created equal. And to further muddy the waters, for much of American theater, stage directions were added to a text after its first production and reference the exact staging used in that production. So, stage directions are there for a reason, but not all reasons are equal. Most of the time, stage directions are helpful and we integrate them without issue. But it's not uncommon to be confronted by a stage direction that doesn't align with our particular production. What then do we do with them as a director? If the stage direction says that this person sits down, but the way that the scene has shaped up means that I don't think it makes sense for the actor to sit, are we violating copyright by not having the actor sit exactly where it says to do so? There are three questions that can be helpful in determining how we approach a given stage direction. First, does it clarify the story? If the stage direction says to sit, it might very well be because there's a line coming up from another character that references the first character sitting down. Ignoring the stage direction in that instance muddies the story and sacrifices clarity. Second, does it carry the author's voice? Using the example from Tennessee Williams earlier, it would be directly contrary to the playwright's stated intent for the play if I were to ignore the direction about non-realism and demand that the scene must instead be hyper-realistic. Note that some playwrights, such as Samuel Beckett, treat all of their stage directions as authoritative and expect that they be followed regardless of the director's approach or vision. Third, does it conflict with the limitations of this particular production? In the play Eurydice by Sarah Ruhl, one of the directions indicates that it is raining inside the elevator. A literal rain may not be possible, so how we choose to approach that stage direction will depend on the capabilities of our venue, budget, and production team. For example, if a script says, she crosses to the phone, but your staging places the phone elsewhere, it might not clarify the story to keep that cross in your blocking. It doesn't seem to particularly carry the author's voice, and it does conflict with the limitations of this particular production. So it's probably okay to ignore the literalness of the direction. Whereas if a script says aside, as in Shakespeare, that's not just blocking, it's a convention of storytelling and the author's voice. Cutting it changes how the audience relates to the character, and even if we adjust who the aside is to, it would be hard to justify removing that entirely. As with all of the choices we make as directors, being able to explain our reasoning is important. Actors, designers, and even the playwright deserve to understand our thinking, especially when we vary from what is on the page. Which is a great segue to talking about copyright. So please note that none of what I'm about to say is legal advice, but it is information that I strongly urge you to keep in mind. Plays fall into three main categories as it relates to copyright. The first is public domain. This category is made up of older works like Shakespeare or Sophocles that are widely understood to no longer belong to the writers, hence the term public domain. These texts are free from copyright, meaning that anyone can take their text and use them in any way they want. Directors can cut text, add text, rearrange text, even add dance numbers. The second category is licensed plays. This category includes anything published since the early 20th century, and there isn't a single bright line as to when a text comes out of copyright, depending on whether it was original, an adaptation, a translation, and more. A quick Google search can usually tell you whether something is still in copyright or not. If you're not sure, it's better to behave like it is until you are. Being under copyright means that a text belongs to the person who wrote it. It's their property, and thus they have the right to decide how, when, and where it is used. The process of producing a script like this is called licensing, meaning that you are requesting permission to use their text for your production, often paying what are called royalties to the author for the use of their work. The licensing for most published plays is managed by the publisher, such as Dramatists Play Service or Concord Theatricals. At the time I'm writing this, many previously independent publishers like Samuel French, Broadway Play Publishing, and others have been bought out by one of the larger companies like Concord. When you license a play, whether from a large or small publisher or a writer directly, you are agreeing to the terms of the agreement, which are usually to present the text as written. That means a director cannot change dialogue or stage directions considered part of the text without explicit permission. This might fly in the face of what many of you listening have experienced, as it is unfortunately common practice for many directors in upstream spaces to make unilateral decisions about changing language in the play. The most common changes are to remove or alter profanity or other strong languages. Some license agreements or texts permit this without seeking additional permission, but the vast majority do not. The next most common reason that a director will illegally alter a script is to cut it for time, to make it shorter for a competition or other limited time slot. And this is almost always illegal without written permission from the publisher and/or playwright. The third category is unpublished or new work. This work is still the property of the writer, but since the writer is A, alive, and B, often in the room for part if not all of the process, the rules depend on your collaboration. As someone who's been directing and producing new work for over 12 years, my experience has been that if I approach a writer with a compelling reason that I'd like to ask for a change to the stage direction in a given scene, they're more than happy to explore that change with me. On the rare occasions that we disagree, it often proves a fruitful conversation for both of us, as it usually means that something else in the writing was unclear, and once they clarify that, the stage direction they want to keep makes more sense to me directorially. Part of the reason that I think so many directors struggle to accept the limitations of copyright is because of the language that the director's vision is somehow paramount in a process. It's one of the reasons that here on Deconstructing Directing, I don't use terms like vision to define a director's role, because theater is a collaborative art form, and one of our most important collaborators are playwrights. It's crucial that we understand that this limitation on a director's ability to make unilateral changes is a feature, not a bug. It pushes us to be able to clearly articulate our rationale and engage with our collaborators effectively. So, let's close by talking about a bigger question. Who owns a play in performance? The playwright authored the text, the director interprets it in space and time, the actors, designers, and crew give it life. Each of those people has a claim on elements of the production. Designs, choreography, and even staging can be considered copyrightable. In this context, when we change stage directions, we're not just moving bodies differently, we're making a claim about authorship. Are we honoring the writer's intent or supplanting it with our own? Fidelity to the text and creativity aren't opposites. They're in constant dialogue. Respecting a playwright's voice doesn't mean erasing your own, but it does mean knowing where the boundaries lie. So, what can we do as directors to honor the work of the playwright as we direct? First, we should always read the licensing agreement closely. If you aren't the one who secured the rights, ask the producer for a copy of the agreement to review. We can ask permission. If we want to cut or change something, reach out to the publisher or playwright. Sometimes they'll say yes. We also need to be transparent. Let our cast and crew know where the boundaries are so that we don't get halfway into rehearsal only to realize a brilliant idea is illegal. We can also distinguish interpretation from alteration. Moving someone's cross 3 steps left, that's interpretation. Cutting a monologue because it feels too long, that's alteration. It might even be helpful to keep a checklist. Is this change legal? Is it respectful? Is it necessary? If you can't answer yes to at least the first one and one of the other questions, it probably shouldn't be done. Stage directions sit at the intersection of creativity and law. They remind us that theater is both an art form and an industry, both play and product. If we ignore them entirely, we risk arrogance. If we obey them blindly, we risk stagnation. So here's my encouragement. Know the rules, respect the playwright, but trust your artistry within the boundaries you've been given. Far from limiting you, those boundaries can be the spark that ignites your most creative solutions. As always, this content is truly and completely 100% free to you and will always be as long as I can help it. That said, if you find it helpful and are able to support it financially, please consider joining my Patreon, which will allow you to set up a small monthly donation and earn fun perks like stickers and more for helping to support this project financially. Even just $5 a month makes a huge difference. I'll see you again when you're ready to dive into the rest of Act 4. Until then, I challenge us all to be recklessly kind.